Welcome to Faith Chats, everyone, where our topic is always about faith, family, freedom, and America. Today, my guest is Bill Walton of The Bill Walton Show. Bill, welcome to the program.
Glad to be here. Glad to talk with you.
So, to begin our conversation, as the leader of the Agency Action and Landings Team for critical economic bodies like the Treasury, IRS, Commerce, USTR, and SEC during the 2016-2017 Trump transition, what were the biggest surprises that you encountered in aligning those agencies with the new administration's priorities? And how might that experience inform preparations for Trump's current tariff escalations against China?
Well, the biggest surprise was that it was, we were coming in on the heels of the Obama administration, and the I wasn't exactly a surprise, but the most of the deep state was very dug into all these agencies, and they were not terribly cooperative, even though we'd won the election, and so we had to fight our way through that. But I think the bigger story here is that I was involved in Trump 1.0, and now we have Trump 2.0. And first time around, he was not prepared. He was conducting his campaign from Trump Tower, and there were a lot of us down in D.C. toiling away, writing what I thought were brilliant, brilliant plans for the agencies. But he wasn't that involved. And so when he came in January, he finally came down from New York, showed up in Washington. It was terra incognita, and I think he got knocked off his game almost right away, and had trouble staffing the administration. And of course, he had to put up with the Russia thing. So it was a nightmare. But in opposition to that 2.0, when we came in, he was prepared, and not only prepared with the plans that he'd worked on, but also he'd done a very good job of lining up all the people he wanted for the cabinet positions. And as we know, this has been a whirlwind. I can't keep up with everything he's doing, but he's 10 times more effective. I don't know if you can put a multiple on it than he was in 1.0. And as we know, he's going to be visiting with President Xi pretty soon. I think tomorrow, in Korea. And anyway, I'll stop here and let you go with your next observation or question.
So, how might that experience inform preparations for Trump's current tariff escalations against China?
Well, the thing about China is that China internally has believed it's at war with the United States for a decade or two or three or maybe forever. And runs very deeply. And Xi, who became president, I think, in 2012, his father had worked for Mao and was a dedicated communist, and he really bought into the theology of communism. And furthermore, Xi had another chip on his shoulder, which is the Chinese suffered through what they call the century of humiliation, which is when the United States and Britain began forcing opiates into China, ironically, to balance our trade budget then, because we were running a surplus that we didn't like. We wanted to balance. We wanted them to buy more stuff from us, so we sold them drugs. The British were mainly involved, but we weren't without guilt. Anyway, so Xi has been carrying that grudge, and the century lasted from roughly the 1840s to 1849 when Mao came in, or 1949. And so it's not only communist doctrine, but it's also this cultural issue, this historical issue that he's trying to correct. And so when we look at something like the fentanyl, which is killing tens of thousands of Americans every year. I mean, more people die of fentanyl than in one year than died in Vietnam the whole time we were at that war. And it's getting worse. I mean, my view is that they see the fentanyl as payback for what we did with them with opium. And so all the headlines you read about this piece of trade or that this negotiation or that thing. I mean, there's a deep emotional, I'd say, hatred that they have for us. And so, I hope Donald brings all of his best deal making skills, because They're tough, they're intractable, and their animosity runs quite deep.
So President Trump just warned of 155% tariffs on Chinese goods starting November 1 unless a deal is struck before his early 2026 China visit. From your vantage point, overseeing USTR and commerce transitions, do you see this as a necessary edge to counter years of perceived ripoffs or a risk that could even boomerang on American consumers and exporters?
Well, if the sense of the question is should we be putting 155% tariffs on China, I agree with Donald Trump on most of what he's doing. I don't agree that tariffs are the best way to accomplish what we want to do with trade. Backing up a bit, looking at our relationship with China, it's not like we've got China over there manufacturing stuff and we're supposed to buy it here and that we're separate economies. Our economies are completely interrelated, and almost all the major industries in America have ties to China, and it's think about the 1.5 billion dollars that the NBA and China, the NBA struck the deal they struck with the Chinese Communist Party. We've got the best tennis players in the world over there playing tennis. Starbucks has more shops in China than they do here in the United States. Apple assembles all of its iPhones in China. Apple, when they were getting going in China, trained up to 28 million Chinese in technical manufacturing techniques, and that's to purportedly to help China build iPhones. But they took that technology and have been using it for every other industry since then. And so it's not just a question here of declaring a trade based on tariffs. I think the 155% was really to get their attention. And so when Donald Trump meets with President Xi on Thursday, it's going to be a very interesting conversation because in this time that uh, over the years, China's figured out strategic industries where they wanted to gain an upper hand. They did it with pharmaceuticals. We can't, in the United States, we can barely manufacture aspirin or antibiotics here. But the key one now is rare earth minerals. And because of the environmental movement and the EPA, we shut down rare earth minerals 20, 25 years ago, haven't produced them here in the United States. And it is critical to all of our technology and our defense industry and automobiles, and every single thing in it uses a chip that involves rare earth minerals to help manufacture. And they decided, what was about a month ago, that they were going to withhold those. That was the bargaining chip they were using. And so, in effect, if unless and they've relented on that in exchange for lower tariffs, but as Trump calls it, well, who holds the cards? Well, we hold some cards, but they also hold some cards as well. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. I think Trump will do a good job, but we're not going to resolve all our issues in one meeting.
So, your work on the transition for independent financial agencies like Social Security and FCC touched on regulatory reform. With Trump's 157% tariffs already in place on select Chinese imports, how should the administration leverage these agencies to mitigate any domestic fallout, such as supply chain disruptions in tech and manufacturing, on business acumen and entrepreneurial freedom?
Uh, I'm not sure. Would you rephrase that question? I want to make sure I get it right. I'm not exactly certain how the financial agencies play into this. What do you mean exactly?
So what I was saying was your work on the transition for independent financial agencies like Social Security and the FCC touched on regulatory reform. With Trump's 157 tariffs already in place on select Chinese imports, how should the administration leverage these agencies to mitigate any domestic fallout?
Well, I think the big picture, really, we took a little regulatory regime we have here in the United States, whether it's the financial agencies or or the EPA or Department of Commerce, I mean, Department of Labor, Agriculture Department. All of the United States, every company in the United States operates under a thick fog of regulation. And the cost of the economy is a couple $1 trillion a year. And it's not only that's direct cost of that, it's the regulations and what they prevent entrepreneurs from doing. And so, whether it's China or whether it's just our competitive position in the world, one of the smart things we can do, and most of the people running Trump's agencies do understand this, is we can roll back some of the regulatory regime that stifled innovation and rebuild our economy from there. I mean, there's some regulations which, of course, you want regulations about food and drugs, but even there, you could say the FDA's completely overplayed its hand, and there's certain things like cancer treatments which a lot of people want, but they've held up for years and years. So there's a lot of work to do, but I think we've got a lot of the right people in place to do it.
So take us back to the beginning. What really inspired you to begin the Bill Walton Show?
Um, I didn't have much to do. No, I was kidding. I'd been a CEO of a New York Stock Exchange company for almost 14 years, and we managed about, I don't know, about 12 billion in assets, private equity, commercial real estate, commercial lending. But before that or during that, I was also president of the symphony and president of a lot of theater groups throughout my entire career and involved with music and the arts. And when we merged our company in 2010, I'd always had an itch to produce movies and ended up producing three movies, pretty successfully. One of them ended up at the Cannes Film Festival. The second one ended up in Tribeca as one of the competitors for the best film of the year. So, by any measures, that's a good thing. I can enjoy having done that. But then I was in Virginia. I still am in Virginia. Producing movies, you really need to be in Hollywood, and I didn't want to move. I didn't want to move to LA. I mean, it's terrible now. It was almost as bad then. And so I decided that with a podcast, you can grab a microphone, grab a pretty good camera, and bring in some people you think are smart and start talking with them. And I could communicate an awful lot that way without all the complexity of producing a feature length film.
So, who's been a memorable guest that you've had or a memorable experience that you've had on the show?
Oh gosh, so many. We had Art Laffer, inventor of the uh, Laffer curve and supply side economics. We had Ed Meese, who was the Attorney General under Ronald Reagan. We've had Kevin Hassett, who's now the chief economic advisor to in Trump's White House office. Had Bob Lighthizer, who ran the trade group for Trump in the first administration. Probably the one that went the most viral was we had Eric Prince on, who founded Blackwater and was very involved in security in Iraq. And he's a friend. He's a great guy, and he had lots of stories about what we needed to do to have an effective military in the 21st century. And so, and that particular one went fairly viral. He's a good interview, charismatic, and he's very smart.
That's
And by the way,
awesome.
you can see all these on our website, thebillwaltonshow.com, and we've got almost 75 interviews, and we aim for evergreen. So a lot of the stuff we talked about 2 years ago is still relevant today. And so we've got a body of work that I think is pretty interesting. You can learn a lot from our podcast.
So, as you mentioned, you founded Rush River Entertainment, which led to acclaimed films like Max Rose, starring Jerry Lewis, and The Ticket, starring Dan Stevens. How did these Hollywood forays, blending business savvy with storytelling, inform your approach to unpacking complex issues on your show?
Well, they're all interrelated. I mean, I tend to be involved. I'm a polymath. That's somebody who tries to learn about everything all the time, and I like learning new things and applying new skills. And I think, when we ran our uh, my public company, if you include portfolio companies, we had almost 20,000 employees. And so you get some skills to manage people in that area. And then the deals we structured were all fairly complicated. And so that was a skill set. And then uh, as head of the symphony, I was involved. I was used to dealing with artists and musicians, and so all you can bring all that to bear in any of these conversations that I've had on the show, and it's so my recommendation to people is try lots of things, learn lots of things, and you never know where it's going to take you.
So, your leadership and cultural pillars like the National Symphony Orchestra as president, Wolf Trap Center for the Performing Arts as an executive committee and finance chairman, and National Gallery of Arts from Collectors Committee and Trustees Council highlights a commitment to the America's artistic soul. In an era of trade wars, how can cultural diplomacy, perhaps through joint U.S. China arts initiatives, soften the edges of economic brinkmanship?
Well, I think culture is one of the main exports of America, and most of the rest of the world wants to be in America because of our cultural exports, which involve things like the symphony and the and fine arts like the National Gallery. But mainly it's streaming TV and films and popular music. And I think that's a mixed bag because if you look at some of the lyrics and some of the music that's being produced now, it's frankly obscene. And so you go over to the Middle East and you talk to Islamists about American culture. There's pieces of it that they rightfully reject and reject violently. We're I don't believe in a national control of the arts, but I do think we've got to be careful as we export our culture to other countries that we present the right image of America. And and most of the arts community is quite frankly anti-American. They don't like America. They don't like our achievements as a nation, and so a lot of that's reflected in the movies that they're making and the paintings they make and so on and so forth. And so what Trump's doing in the cultural area, he took over the Kennedy Center Performing Arts, which was the symphony was part of that, and he's remaking the programming. And the programming at the Kennedy Center, they used to do, drag shows for children, and that's all gone. And now we're bringing in other culturally um, attractive performances that I think is a step in the right direction.
So, as chairman of the Kelly School of Business, you mentored the next generation of leaders. For MBA students watching Trump's tariff saga unfold, what's the one lesson from your transition team days or allied capital growth story that you could prepare them to thrive amid global disruptions?
Well, but I always invest in yourself. I mean, it's sort of what I talk about being a polymath, and learn skills, including the soft skills, which is how to deal with people, negotiation, sales, that sort of thing. You've got to be able to be effective with people, not just technical things. And one of the interesting things now with artificial intelligence, there's a lot of discussion about AI taking jobs, and it will eliminate some jobs, but it's going to create some others. And now I'm finding with AI, and I use it all the time, is you don't need to be a programmer to be effective in getting AI to be a great tool. And so my advice to somebody young is focus on mastering what AI is about, and also becoming a prompt engineer and understanding how to get it to do what you want it to do, because that's going to make you very employable. And then, 10 years from now, who knows what technology we'll be talking about. But here and now, I'd focus on AI.
So, to close out the interview, looking forward looking toward Trump's potential Xi meeting and the November 1st tariff deadline, what's the boldest common sense prediction that you'd make about the outcome? And how might it echo the abundance mindset you foster on the Bill Walton show through conversations on money, culture, and politics?
I think the the bold prediction I'd make about the meeting this week with President Trump and President Xi is keep your expectations low. And I think there's an awful lot of things which are not going to be dealt with in a face-to-face meeting. I think that we will end up getting some concessions on fentanyl. I think we will end up getting some concessions on rare earth minerals, which will allow our technology industries to thrive. On the other side, we're likely to dramatically reduce the tariffs on Chinese goods. But we still got an awful lot of work to do. As I've said, I think I mentioned earlier, virtually every industry in America has deep ties to China. And so unwinding that is not something I don't think we're going to be able to do. So we're going to have to develop an accommodation with a country where, frankly, they don't like us. But on the other hand, they need us for markets and for our dollar and our our capital markets primacy.
Well, Bill, thank you so much for your time. I encourage people to go to
Thank you.
billwaltonshow.com. They can
Yeah.
find out more about you. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you. I covered a lot. Hope we got some of these things clear.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.